I texted my family feeling sad that no one remembered my 29th birthday. My mother replied, "We are better off without you, do not contact us again." My sister liked the message, so I blocked them along with their access to the $15 million family fortune they had been living off. The next day, I woke up to over 100 missed calls. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. I sat alone in my modest Brooklyn apartment, staring at a single vanilla cupcake. It was my 29th birthday. I had spent the entire day working at my wealth management firm, hoping my phone would ring. It did not. Growing up in a strict upper-middle-class household in elite circles, excellence was the baseline. Because I chose to become a financial planner instead of a neurosurgeon like my sister Serena, I was treated as the family embarrassment. My parents, Marcus and Helena, spent their lives curating a flawless image for their country club friends. To them, I was just a glorified bank teller. I picked up my phone and opened our family group chat. I typed a simple message. "Today is my birthday. Does anyone want to grab dinner tonight?" The delivery notification turned into read receipts almost instantly on my screen. 3 minutes passed before my mother replied. Her message popped up on the screen, completely devoid of warmth. "We need space, Chloe. Honestly, we are better off without you right now. Do not contact us again." A notification chimed immediately after. Serena had hearted my mother's message. Then came a text from Preston, my sister's arrogant white investment broker husband. He always loved inserting his privilege into our family dynamics. He wrote, "Go buy yourself a cheap pizza, Chloe. We are busy packing for our yacht party in Martha's Vineyard. We do not have time for your pity parties." I stared at the glowing screen. For 29 years, I had swallowed their casual cruelty. I remembered when I graduated college and they skipped my ceremony to attend Serena's engagement party. I remembered my mother telling me to fix my natural hair because it did not fit the wealthy image they wanted to project. But tonight, looking at that cupcake, I did not cry. I simply set the phone down on the table and opened my work laptop. They called me a glorified bank teller. They constantly mocked my career choices. But they conveniently ignored one massive detail. I was the sole legal trust administrator of my late grandfather's irrevocable $15 million estate. Grandfather Harrison knew exactly who my parents were. He knew they cared more about respectability politics and designer labels than hard work. That is why he bypassed them entirely and put the keys to the kingdom in my hands. For years, I had silently approved their monthly living stipends. I had authorized the secondary black cards they used to fund their lavish country club brunches and Martha's Vineyard vacations. They treated the trust like an endless ATM while treating me like dirt. I logged into the internal firm portal. The security clearance recognized my credentials immediately. I navigated to the primary family trust dashboard. With 3 keystrokes, I pulled up Serena and Preston's joint credit line. I hit revoke. I moved to my parents' accounts. The monthly living stipend of $25,000 was scheduled to drop at midnight. I canceled the transfer. I froze the secondary debit cards. I locked the emergency fund access. I watched the status indicators turn from active to suspended across the board. The entire process took less than 5 minutes. They wanted space. I was giving them exactly what they asked for: financial space. I closed my laptop, blew out the solitary candle on my cupcake, and went to sleep. My phone started vibrating violently at 6 in the morning. When I finally rolled over and checked the screen, I had 114 missed calls. 40 from my mother, 50 from Serena, the rest from Preston. My text inbox was a chaotic stream of panic. My mother had gone from demanding space to demanding answers. "Chloe, call me right now, the bank is making a mistake." I ignored the texts and tapped on my voicemails. The most recent one was from Preston. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. His voice was frantic, echoing off what sounded like a large showroom floor. "Chloe, pick up the phone. I am at the dealership trying to close on the new Porsche, and my black card just declined in front of the entire sales team. Do you hear me?" My card declined. Fix this error immediately, or I am calling the police. I smiled, pouring myself a cup of coffee. The golden child's husband was currently sweating in a luxury car dealership, realizing his free ride was over. I deleted the voicemail. The war had officially begun, and they had absolutely no idea who they were fighting. I arrived at my office at Harrison Wealth Management precisely at 8 o'clock. The marble floors of the lobby gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, and the quiet hum of high finance filled the air. This was my sanctuary. For the last 5 years, I had worked my way up from junior analyst to senior trust administrator, while my family assumed I was just fetching coffee. I had barely set my briefcase down at my desk when my office phone rang. It was Brenda, the front desk receptionist, and her voice was shaking. "Chloe, there is a situation in the lobby. Some people claiming to be your family are demanding to see you, and they are causing quite a scene." I walked out of my glass-enclosed office and headed toward the main elevators. The moment the polished steel doors opened onto the ground floor, the shouting hit me. My mother, Helena, was standing in the center of the pristine lobby, wearing a tailored Chanel suit that the trust had undoubtedly paid for. Next to her stood my father, Marcus, red-faced and furious, clutching his leather briefcase like a weapon. Serena hovered slightly behind them, holding a designer bag and looking around to see who was watching. They looked like the picture of elite respectability, but their behavior was completely unhinged. They were breaking every rule of the high society decorum they constantly preached about. Helena spotted me stepping out of the elevator. Her voice echoed off the marble walls, silencing the executives and clients passing through. "You are an absolute embarrassment to this family, Chloe." My mother marched toward me, her finger pointing directly at my face. I stood my ground, crossing my arms as the security guards at the front desk began to watch closely. "You refused to pledge Alpha Kappa. Alpha because you thought you were too good for our traditions. You dropped out of medical school to humiliate your father. And now you are throwing a childish tantrum by locking our accounts. Do you have any idea what you have done?" I looked at her perfectly manicured hand pointing at me. I did not raise my voice. I did not flinch. I kept my tone deadpan and professional. "I secured the assets of an irrevocable trust against unauthorized depletion. That is my legal job, Helena." My father stepped forward, attempting to use the booming, authoritative voice he used at his country club board meetings. "You will unlock those accounts right this second. Preston is at the dealership right now being treated like a common criminal because your little stunt declined his card. Do you know how that looks? Do you know who we are? We are the Harrisons. We do not get our cards declined by some low-level clerk. You are going to fix this before our reputation is ruined in this city." I looked at my father and felt a deep sense of pity mixed with disgust. "You are Marcus and Helena. You are beneficiaries who receive a generous monthly stipend. You are not the trustees. Grandfather made sure of that when he handed me the keys. He knew you would drain the family fortune to impress people who do not even like you. And right now, you are trespassing in a private corporate building." I turned to the security desk. "Frank, please call building security and have these individuals escorted out. They do not have appointments." Serena suddenly stepped forward, playing her favorite role as the family peacemaker and victim. She put her hand on her chest, looking at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Chloe, please stop being so aggressive. Why are you acting like this? That text message Mom sent yesterday was just a joke. You are being overly dramatic and taking everything completely out of context. You know Mom did not mean we actually wanted you out of our lives. You are overreacting just like you always do when things do not go your way." I stared at my sister. The golden child who had never worked a hard day in her life, standing there trying to gaslight me in front of my colleagues. "Serena, you literally liked the message where our mother told me never to contact her again on my birthday." I replied, keeping my voice steady and cold. "A joke is supposed to be funny. Revoking your access to $15 million is not a joke. It is a financial reality. You told me to go away and I went away. I took the checkbook with me." Serena scoffed, crossing her arms and rolling her eyes. You are just jealous. You have always been jealous of my life and my marriage to Preston. You are trying to sabotage our yacht party because you have nothing going on in your own pathetic life. You are acting like an angry, bitter woman, and you need to get help. It is humiliating that you are doing this to your own flesh and blood. The classic trope, calling the dark-skinned sister angry and aggressive to deflect from their own toxic behavior. I had lived with this dynamic for 29 years. Whenever I set a boundary, I was the aggressive one. Whenever they crossed a line, they were just misunderstood. But today, their manipulation tactics hit a brick wall. My emotional detachment was my strongest weapon against their coordinated chaos. I am not angry, Serena. I am highly efficient, I said, looking her up and down. I suggest you figure out how you are going to pay the docking fees for your yacht party, because the trust will no longer cover your luxury vacations. The emergency fund is frozen. The secondary credit lines are terminated. You will receive your standard living stipend once I complete a full forensic audit of your recent spending. Until then, you are on your own. You wanted space to live your fabulous lives so you can figure out how to fund them without my signature. My mother let out a loud, dramatic gasp, clutching her pearls in genuine shock. You cannot do this to us. We will sue you. We will take you to court and have you removed from the firm. We will tell the board of directors that you are mentally unstable and unfit to manage these assets. I smiled for the first time that morning. A calm, chilling smile that made my father take a physical step back. You are welcome to hire a lawyer, Helena. But since I just froze the accounts you used to pay your legal retainers, I suggest you find someone who works pro bono. The sound of heavy footsteps clicking rapidly across the lobby floor interrupted us. The building security team was arriving, but they were not alone. Pushing past the guards was Preston, his face pale and contorted with absolute rage. The luxury car dealership had clearly kicked him to the curb. He was clutching a thick manila folder in his hand, breathing heavily as if he had sprinted from his car to the building. The second phase of their attack had just arrived. Preston marched across the lobby floor with the heavy, entitled footsteps of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. His designer suit was slightly rumpled, a clear sign that his morning had been as chaotic as his voicemail suggested. He slammed the thick manila folder down onto the marble reception desk with a loud smack that made Brenda jump in her seat. "Call off your guards, Chloe," Preston ordered. His voice was booming, designed to project authority and intimidate anyone in his path. He did not look at me like a sister-in-law. He looked at me like an insubordinate employee. He turned his attention to the two security guards who had just arrived. "Stand down, gentlemen. I am the CEO of Blackwood Investments and the legal financial representative for the Harrison family. You do not need to escort anyone out. The only person leaving this building in disgrace today is her." My parents, Marcus and Helena, immediately stood taller. Their previous panic vanished, replaced by a sickeningly smug confidence. They had always worshipped Preston. To them, he was the ultimate prize, a wealthy white executive who validated their elite status at the country club. Serena rushed to her husband, clinging to his arm like he was a conquering hero. She shot me a triumphant glare. "You should have just answered your phone, Chloe," Serena sneered. "Preston had to leave a very important client meeting to come down here and clean up your mess." My father crossed his arms, looking at me with absolute disdain. "You should have listened to us, Chloe. Now you have to deal with a real financial expert. Preston handles accounts worth 10 times your little salary. You are completely out of your depth. Hand over the access codes, and maybe Preston will not press charges." I kept my hands resting casually in my pockets. I did not raise my voice. I let the silence stretch for a long, uncomfortable moment before I spoke. "This is a private wealth management firm, Preston. You have exactly 30 seconds to state your business before Frank here calls the police and has you arrested for trespassing." Preston let out a sharp, condescending laugh. He opened the manila folder and pulled out a stack of legal papers stamped with a golden notary seal. He held the document up like a weapon. "You are not calling anyone. I have right here a fully executed power of attorney, signed and notarized by Marcus and Helena Harrison. This legally binds their estate to my firm. They have authorized me to manage their assets. You are going to walk upstairs, log into your little computer, and unfreeze the family accounts immediately. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. The scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the nervous sweat radiating from him. Listen to me very carefully, Chloe. He lowered his voice, adopting a menacing tone. If you do not unlock those accounts right now, I will have you arrested for financial fraud. You have illegally restricted access to millions of dollars. You are embezzling family funds to settle some petty childhood grudge. My firm has the best lawyers in the city. I will personally see to it that you are thrown in federal prison and stripped of all your professional licenses. Unfreeze the trust or you are leaving this building in handcuffs. I looked at the document in his hands. Then I looked at my parents. They were nodding in agreement. They truly believed that this investment bro had swooped in to save them from their rebellious daughter. They had so much faith in his perceived superiority that they never bothered to check if he actually knew what he was doing. I slowly pulled my hands out of my pockets. I reached over and took the document from Preston. He smiled arrogantly, clearly thinking I had surrendered. I flipped through the first 3 pages of the power of attorney, reading the heavy legal jargon he had undoubtedly paid some junior associate thousands of dollars to draft. "This is a very impressive document, Preston," I said, keeping my tone conversational. "The formatting is excellent. The notary seal is authentic. There is just one massive, catastrophic flaw that a supposedly elite investment CEO should have caught before making a fool of himself in a corporate lobby." Preston frowned, his arrogant smile slipping just a fraction. "What are you talking about? The paperwork is ironclad." I dropped the document back onto the marble desk. It slid across the smooth surface and hit his chest. "You cannot grant power of attorney over assets you do not own," I said loudly, ensuring my voice carried across the lobby. My grandfather did not leave his fortune in a standard bank account. He established a generation-skipping irrevocable trust. Do you know what the word irrevocable means, Preston? It means the assets are legally owned by the trust itself, not by the beneficiaries. Marcus and Helena do not own that $15 million. They merely receive a discretionary allowance from it. I took a step forward, forcing him to take a step back. Under the Uniform Trust Code, the fiduciary power rests entirely with the named administrator. Any attempt by a beneficiary to reassign control of an irrevocable entity without a court order is not just invalid, it is borderline criminal. You are operating an investment firm, and you do not know the difference between a revocable living trust and a generation-skipping trust. Did you even pass your licensing exams, or did your father buy those for you too? The color began to drain from Preston's face. The realization of his complete lack of power hit him like a physical blow. You cannot claim jurisdiction over a trust simply because the beneficiaries signed a piece of paper. This power of attorney is legally worthless garbage. I continued. You might as well have brought me a permission slip signed by a toddler. As the sole appointed trustee, I am the only person on this planet with the legal authority to move, freeze, or distribute a single cent of that money. Serena looked at him, her triumphant expression morphing into confusion. "Preston, what is she talking about? Tell her she has to unlock the cards. Tell her she is wrong." Preston ignored his wife. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You cannot do this. You are breaching your fiduciary duty. We have mounting bills. We have investments tied up. You are destroying this family." "No, I am protecting the estate from thieves." I turned to the security guards who were watching the exchange with intense focus. "Frank, these people have no legal standing here. They are trespassing and attempting to use fraudulent documents to extort money from a wealth manager. Remove them from the premises immediately. If they resist, call the police." The guard stepped forward, grabbing Preston by the arm. He tried to yank himself free, his face turning a dark shade of red. "Do not touch me. I know people in this city. I will ruin you, Chloe. I will ruin this entire firm." As the guards began dragging him toward the revolving glass doors, my parents and Serena scrambled to follow, shouting protests and threats. I walked slowly behind them, stopping just a few feet from the exit. Preston was still struggling against the guards, spewing insults and demanding respect. I raised my voice to cut through his yelling. "By the way, Preston," I called out. He stopped struggling for a brief second, glaring at me over his shoulder. I locked eyes with him and delivered the final blow. Care to explain to my parents why $2 million from the Trust Emergency Fund was wired to a shell company in the Cayman Islands under your name last month? The lobby fell dead silent. Even the security guards stopped moving. Marcus and Helena froze in their tracks, turning slowly to look at their son-in-law. Serena let out a sharp, confused gasp. Marcus dropped his briefcase on the floor with a loud thud. Helena grabbed her chest, her perfect Chanel suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Serena grabbed Preston's arm, shaking him frantically. "Preston, what is she talking about? What Cayman account? Where did that money go?" Preston's face went completely pale. The angry red flush vanished, leaving him looking like a ghost. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogant, wealthy savior facade crumbled into dust right before my eyes. I smiled at my parents' terrified faces. "My forensic audit is already underway," I said cheerfully. "Have a wonderful afternoon." I turned my back on them and walked toward the elevators, leaving them to tear each other apart on the sidewalk. I stepped into my office and let the heavy glass door click shut behind me. The silence of the executive suite was absolute bliss, but it did not last long. My phone began vibrating against the mahogany desk with the intensity of a drill. I had expected a reaction from my family, but the sheer volume of notifications flooding my screen was unprecedented. The war tactics had shifted from the lobby to the digital world. I tapped the Instagram icon and there she was. Serena was broadcasting live to her 50,000 followers. She sat in the back of an Uber, dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes with a designer tissue. Her voice trembled with practiced vulnerability, perfectly calibrated to garner maximum sympathy. "I never thought I would have to make a video like this." Serena sniffled, looking directly into the camera lens. "My own sister Chloe has completely lost her mind. She used a legal loophole at her job to freeze our family accounts. She is holding my parents hostage financially, all because she is jealous of my marriage to Preston and the life we have built. She has always hated that I am a successful business owner. Please pray for my family. Chloe needs serious mental help." The comments on the live feed were a rapid stream of support for Serena and vicious attacks on me. Then came the direct messages. My phone chimed continuously as the extended family mobilized. The flying monkeys had been officially unleashed. Aunt Valerie, the president of the local Lynx chapter, and my mother's best friend, sent a scathing voice note. "Chloe, you have always been a bitter girl. Just because you refused to pledge Alpha Kappa Alpha and spent your college years buried in boring finance books instead of finding a husband does not give you the right to steal from your parents. Unlock those accounts before you disgrace the Harrison name at church this Sunday. You are acting like a common thug." A text from Uncle Robert popped up next. "You are acting exactly like you did when Serena won the debutante pageant. Sulking in the corner and trying to ruin the celebration. Grow up and fix this before Preston sues you." I did not reply to a single message. Defending myself to people committed to misunderstanding me was a waste of breath. They wanted me to lash out. They wanted the angry, aggressive black woman narrative to justify their mistreatment of me. I was not going to give them that satisfaction. I silenced my phone, tossed it into my drawer, and flipped open my laptop. If they wanted to play dirty, I was going to play with data. I picked up my desk phone and dialed the direct line to Marcus Sterling. He was the most ruthless forensic accountant on the East Coast and one of the few black partners at my wealth management firm. He had mentored me since I started as a junior analyst, and he knew exactly what my family was capable of. "Marcus, I need an emergency rush job," I said when he answered. "I just locked down the Harrison Irrevocable Trust. I need you to pull every transaction record, wire transfer, and offshore routing number attached to Preston Blackwood and my sister Serena for the last 5 years. Tear the accounts apart." I already saw the red flags popping up on the compliance dashboard, Chloe. Marcus replied, his voice low and serious. "Your brother-in-law has been incredibly sloppy. You threw a rock at a hornet's nest today. Come down to my office. We need to look at this together." I spent the next 4 hours in his secure office pulling raw financial data. The spreadsheets projected onto his large monitor were a glaring map of absolute financial ruin. We traced the $2 million wire transfer to the Cayman Islands. Preston had set up a dummy corporation listing Serena as a shadow director. He had moved the money through 3 different shell companies trying to wash the origin of the funds. But the bleeding went much deeper than Preston and his offshore accounts. We pivoted to look at Serena's luxury lifestyle brand. The boutique my parents bragged about at every country club dinner was a total sham. Marcus pulled up the vendor receipts and tax filings. Serena had not made a single legitimate retail sale in 3 years. Instead, she was funneling trust money into her business accounts to make it look profitable. She was creating fake invoices and paying phantom vendors. She secretly used the trust funds to pay off massive credit card debts she had accumulated trying to keep up with Preston's wealthy white friends. She was funding her designer wardrobe, his country club fees, and her flawless Instagram aesthetic entirely with grandfather Harrison's hard-earned money. "Look at this sequence right here," Marcus said, pointing a laser pointer at a series of authorized transfers from my parents' joint account. "Your parents knew about the failing business. They authorized temporary liquidity releases to cover Serena's shortfalls every single quarter for the last 36 months. They were bleeding the trust dry to keep up the illusion that their golden child was a successful entrepreneur." I stared at the screen, feeling a cold wave of clarity wash over me. They had lied to my face for years. They sat at holiday dinners calling my career a joke while relying entirely on the money I was legally guarding. They protected the golden child and her arrogant husband, even as it drove the entire family toward bankruptcy. They willingly sacrificed my grandfather's legacy just to maintain their fake respectability among the elite. "Print every single page of this audit," I told Marcus without taking my eyes off the monitor. "Put it in a hard binder and certify the findings." They think a few crying videos on social media and some angry text messages from church elders will force my hand. Let them talk. I am going to let them dig their graves so deep that not even their country club friends can pull them out. I walked out of Marcus' office with that heavy certified binder tucked under my arm, feeling an icy sense of purpose. Sunday morning arrived with crisp sunshine and the kind of deceptive calm that usually precedes a hurricane. The Oakwood Country Club was a historic institution. It was a predominantly black establishment where the city's elite doctors, lawyers, and legacy families gathered every Sunday after church to display their wealth and dissect each other's lives over crab cakes and bottomless mimosas. My parents lived for this brunch. It was their weekly performance stage. I parked my sensible sedan between a row of gleaming Range Rovers and Porsches. I was not wearing my usual corporate attire. I chose a striking emerald green dress that commanded attention, paired with my grandmother's vintage pearls. If I was going to crash their high society sanctuary, I was going to do it looking like the rightful heir to the Harrison fortune. Tucked securely under my arm was the thick black binder containing the forensic audit Marcus and I had finalized on Friday night. As I walked through the grand mahogany double doors, the familiar scent of fresh lilies and expensive perfume hit me. The dining room was a sea of pastel suits, extravagant church hats, and polite laughter. I spotted my family immediately. They were holding court at a large round table near the floor-to-ceiling windows. My mother Helena wore a forced bright smile while adjusting her oversized hat. My father Marcus was leaning in far too close to Judge Peterson, whispering something with a tense expression. Serena sat next to Aunt Valerie, aggressively swirling her drink. I did not need to hear the conversation to know exactly what was happening. I watched my father pat the judge's shoulder, giving a strained chuckle. They were begging. They were playing off the frozen trust accounts as a temporary banking glitch and quietly asking their wealthy friends for short-term loans to cover their bounced checks and ruined credit. They were using their social capital to survive the financial drought I had orchestrated. I moved across the dining room with slow, deliberate steps. The low hum of gossip died down as people began to notice me. Aunt Valerie was the first to spot my approach. Her eyes widened and she nudged my mother. Helena turned, her smile instantly dropping into a look of absolute panic. My father stopped mid-sentence following my mother's gaze. Marcus immediately jumped up from his chair. His face flushed a deep shade of crimson as he hurried over to intercept me before I could reach the table. He grabbed my elbow with a tight bruising grip, trying to steer me toward the private hallway leading to the restrooms. His voice was a low, frantic hiss meant only for my ears. "What are you doing here, Chloe? You have already caused enough damage. Stop this foolishness right now and remember your place. You are making a spectacle of us in front of the entire congregation." I looked down at his hand gripping my arm. Then I looked up into his desperate, angry eyes. I yanked my arm out of his grasp with enough force to make him stumble back. My voice was completely level, but loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear every single syllable. "My place." I repeated the words, tasting the decades of disrespect attached to them. "My place." Like when you made me sit in the back of the car so Preston's golf clubs could ride in the passenger seat. Like when you told me to skip my own college graduation because Serena needed you to help her pick out floral arrangements for an engagement party. You have spent my entire life reminding me of my place, Marcus. And my place has always been beneath you, beneath Serena, and beneath the image you try to project to these people. Aunt Valerie gasped loudly from the table. Several other prominent church members turned their chairs to watch the confrontation. The elite Sunday brunch had officially ground to a halt. My mother stood up, clutching her napkin to her chest. "Chloe, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling with manufactured victimhood. "Do not do this. We are your family. We love you. We are just trying to understand why you have become so hostile and vindictive. We have given you everything." I ignored my father's sputtered warnings and walked right past him, stepping directly up to the main table. The entire country club was watching us now. Waiters stood frozen with trays of food. The polite classical music playing through the speakers seemed to mock the absolute destruction about to take place. Serena glared at me from across the table, her arms crossed defensively. "You are sick, Chloe," she spat out. "You came here to humiliate us because you are empty inside. You want everyone to think we are the bad guys when you are the one who stole our money. You are just an angry, bitter woman trying to tear down everything we built." "I did not steal anything, Serena," I said, keeping my posture perfectly straight. "I am the legal administrator of the Harrison Irrevocable Trust. I simply stopped you from stealing it." Aunt Valerie shook her head, looking at me with pure disdain. "This is a disgrace. How dare you speak to your mother and sister this way? You are embarrassing the Harrison name in front of the entire community. We all know you locked their accounts out of pure spite. You need to apologize and fix this immediately before you ruin your own reputation in this town." I looked at Aunt Valerie. I looked at the judge, the doctors, and the other wealthy friends my parents had been desperately trying to impress and secure loans from just moments prior. They all thought they knew the story. They all thought I was the aggressive, ungrateful sister throwing a tantrum. They were about to learn the truth about the golden family they worshipped. Spite did not drain $2 million into a shell company in the Cayman Islands. I said, my voice ringing clear across the silent dining room. Spite did not forge phantom vendor invoices to cover massive personal credit card debts. Spite did not force my parents to authorize emergency liquidity releases every single quarter just to keep Serena's fake luxury boutique from filing for bankruptcy. The blood completely drained from Serena's face. My mother let out a strangled, choked sound, grasping the edge of the table to keep her balance. My father stood frozen, his mouth hanging open in sheer terror. The whispering among the wealthy patrons completely stopped, replaced by a stunned, heavy silence. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I lifted the heavy black binder from under my arm. The certified forensic audit. The undeniable mathematical proof of their greed, their fraud, and their absolute financial ruin. I held it up for a brief second, letting the gold lettering on the cover catch the light of the chandeliers. Then I dropped the thick folder directly onto the center of the brunch table right in front of the gossiping aunties. It hit the wood with a massive, resounding slam that rattled the crystal champagne flutes and shattered the Harrison family facade forever. The impact of the binder hitting the table silenced the room entirely. Aunt Valerie jumped slightly in her chair, her eyes darting from my face to the bold gold lettering on the cover of the report. Judge Peterson leaned in so far he nearly knocked over his coffee cup. I reached forward and flipped the heavy cover open. The first page displayed a stark, unarguable summary graph detailing the rapid decline of the family assets. I turned directly to the section demarcated by a bright red tab. I looked right at Aunt Valerie, whose eyes were practically bugging out of her head. "This is the financial reality of the Harrison family," I announced. My voice was steady and carried perfectly across the quiet dining room. I pointed to the top spreadsheet. "My sister Serena owns a luxury boutique that our mother praises at every single social event in this city. The truth is that the boutique has not made a single legitimate retail sale in 36 months. It is completely, utterly bankrupt." Serena let out a sound that was half shriek and half growl. She lunged across the wide circular table. Her hands scrambled desperately for the binder, but she only managed to hit the glassware. Two crystal champagne flutes shattered against the china plates. Orange juice and expensive champagne flooded the crisp white linen, soaking directly into Aunt Valerie's silk dress. The older woman jumped back with a yelp of horror, but her eyes remained glued to the financial documents I was holding. "Do not touch those, Serena," I warned, sliding the binder out of her reach. "Those are certified legal documents. You cannot shred them like you shred your overdue credit card bills." Serena stood there, chest heaving, dripping in spilled mimosas. "You have no right to look at my business records," she screamed. Her voice was shrill and cracking, breaking every rule of country club etiquette. "I did not look at your business records," I replied calmly. "I looked at the trust records, the same trust you have been bleeding dry." I turned the page, revealing a highlighted list of bank transfers. "For 3 years, you have been funneling trust money into your business accounts using fake invoices from phantom vendors. But the money did not go toward inventory or payroll. It went to pay off your secret mountain of credit card debt. It went to fund Preston's lavish lifestyle." I read directly from the audit, making sure my diction was crystal clear. $50,000 for Preston's exotic car lease, $30,000 for his exclusive golf club memberships, hundreds of thousands spent on designer clothes, luxury vacations, and maintaining your flawless Instagram aesthetic. You literally stole from our grandfather's legacy to pretend you and your husband are self-made billionaires. I expected my parents to finally see the truth. I expected the raw, undeniable data to break through their delusion. I expected them to realize that their golden child was dragging them into federal fraud territory. Instead, my mother rushed to Serena's side, wrapping her arms around her soaking wet daughter. Helena turned her furious gaze on me, her face twisted in pure rage. "How dare you do this to your sister?" my mother shouted. "She is an entrepreneur. She is building a brand." My father stepped up beside them, puffing out his chest to present a united front. "Your mother is right. Businesses take time to become profitable, Chloe. We authorized those transfers to support her vision. You wouldn't understand because you are just a paper pusher. You sit behind a desk and crunch numbers while your sister is out there taking real risks. She is creating a legacy." I stared at them in genuine disbelief. The sheer magnitude of their delusion was staggering. They were standing in the middle of an elite country club, actively begging their friends for loans to cover their bounced checks while simultaneously defending the very person who had bankrupted them. They were willing to go down with a sinking ship as long as Serena was the captain. "A brand," I repeated. "She is not building a brand, Helena. She is committing wire fraud. You authorized temporary liquidity releases because she lied to you about her revenue. But even if you willingly gave her the money, you violated the terms of the generation-skipping trust. Grandfather's stipulations were clear. The trust is for the health, education, and maintenance of the beneficiaries. Funding a fraudulent lifestyle brand and paying off an investment broker's sports car lease does not qualify as maintenance." Judge Peterson and the other country club members were whispering furiously among themselves. The facade was totally gone. They were seeing the Harrisons for what they truly were. They were broke, desperate, and engaged in active financial fraud. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, rattling the remaining silverware. "We are the Harrisons. We handle our affairs internally. You are a spiteful, jealous girl who could not handle being the least successful person in this family, so you resorted to sabotage. You think this little binder gives you power over us. It changes nothing. We will simply have you removed as trustee. We will tell the board you are unstable. A paper pusher, I mused, ignoring his empty threats. That paper pusher is the only thing standing between you and a federal indictment, Marcus. If I hand this binder over to the authorities, Serena goes to prison for embezzlement and wire fraud. And you and Helena go down as co-conspirators for authorizing the release of restricted funds. My mother gasped, clutching Serena's arm even tighter. You would not dare send your own sister to jail. We are your family. You stopped being my family the moment you told me you were better off without me, I replied, keeping my voice entirely devoid of emotion. I am acting as the fiduciary of the Harrison estate. My duty is to the assets, not to your feelings. I closed the binder with a firm snap. The sound echoed through the dining room, finalizing the destruction of their perfect image. Serena was trembling openly now, her eyes darting around the room as she realized the aunties and uncles of her social circle were looking at her with pure disgust. The golden child had been stripped of her shine. I picked up the binder and tucked it neatly back under my arm. I looked at my parents one last time. You have 48 hours to vacate the summer house in Martha Vineyard. I am selling it to replenish the emergency fund you let your son-in-law steal. Have a wonderful brunch. I did not wait for a response from the table. I turned my back on the shattered crystal, the spilled champagne, and the horrified stares of the Oakwood Country Club elite. My heels clicked a steady rhythmic beat against the polished hardwood floors of the dining room. The silence I left in my wake was absolute. No one whispered. No one moved. I pushed through the heavy mahogany double doors and stepped out into the crisp Sunday afternoon air. The adrenaline that had carried me through the dining room was beginning to settle, transforming into a cold, razor-sharp focus. I handed my ticket to the valet, but before he could even jog toward the parking lot, I heard the heavy, frantic pounding of footsteps behind me. Chloe, wait. Preston barked, his voice echoing loudly against the stone pillars of the entryway. I turned slowly. The man charging down the manicured stone pathway looked nothing like the polished, arrogant investment CEO who usually sneered at me across holiday dinner tables. His expensive linen suit jacket was unbuttoned and flapping in the wind. His tie was loosened and askew. A thick sheen of sweat coated his forehead and his face was flushed an ugly mottled purple. He was breathing heavily, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. He looked feral. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire kingdom burn to ash. I held up my hand as he closed the distance between us. I pulled my smartphone from my clutch, tapped the screen, and held it up clearly in front of my chest. Preston, I am currently recording our interaction for my personal legal records. I stated, my voice loud and perfectly enunciated. He did not care. He was too blind with rage and too accustomed to getting his way to process the warning. He lunged forward, slamming his open palm against the hood of my car, trapping me between his body and the vehicle. The valet stopped dead in his tracks a few yards away, his eyes wide with alarm. I gave the valet a brief nod, signaling that I had the situation under control. He hesitated but stepped back, keeping a watchful eye on the aggressive man blocking my path. You think you are so smart, Chloe, Preston hissed, leaning in so close I could smell the expensive scotch and panic radiating off him. You think some spreadsheet gives you the right to walk in there and disrespect my wife? You are going to march right back into that dining room and tell everyone that you made a mistake. You are going to unlock those trust accounts by the end of the day, or I swear to God I will destroy you. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I just kept the phone angled toward him, the red recording icon blinking steadily on the bright screen. And how exactly do you plan to do that, Preston? I asked, keeping my tone conversational and mild. He laughed, a harsh, guttural sound devoid of any real humor. I know the senior partners at your wealth management firm. I play golf with your managing director every single month. Do you really think they will keep a loose cannon on their payroll once I tell them what you did today? I will manufacture a compliance scandal so massive you will never work in the financial sector again. I will claim you embezzled funds from your clients. I will claim you forged those trust documents to extort your own family. I will tell the board you are having a mental breakdown. I will ruin your career, your reputation, and your entire life. No one will believe an angry dropout over a respected investment CEO. The irony of his insult was almost poetic. They had always clung to that false narrative to make themselves feel superior. Because I had transferred out of the prestigious pre-law program my parents forced me into and chosen to pursue finance at a state university, they branded me a dropout. They used that word to diminish my credentials while elevating Preston's inherited legacy and Serena's fake boutique. "You are done, Chloe," he sneered, his face twisted in a vicious, ugly mask. "You are going to fix this, or I am making the calls tomorrow morning. You are a nobody. I am a Blackwood. You do not win this." I let his words hang in the air for a long, breathless moment. I wanted the silence to capture the absolute certainty of his threat. I wanted the microphone to pick up the echoing finality of his blackmail attempt. Then I smiled. It was not a polite smile. It was the smile of a predator watching its prey walk willingly into a steel trap. I tapped the screen of my phone, ending the recording. "Thank you for confirming your intent to blackmail a fiduciary, Preston," I said, tapping the screen a few more times to finalize the save. In Massachusetts, two-party consent laws require that all parties are notified of a recording. I notified you the exact second you walked up to my car. You chose to keep speaking. You chose to explicitly outline your plan to commit extortion and fabricate compliance violations against a licensed financial administrator. The aggressive red flush drained from his face so fast he looked physically ill. His hand slowly slid off the hood of my car, leaving a sweaty palm print on the glossy paint. "What did you just do?" he whispered, his voice suddenly lacking all its previous venom and authority. "I just uploaded the audio file directly to a secure cloud server and copied Marcus Sterling," I replied smoothly, slipping the phone back into my clutch and snapping it shut. "You see, Preston, you are absolutely right about one thing. The financial sector protects its own. But they protect the money, not the liabilities. And right now you are a massive walking liability." He stumbled backward, shaking his head in denial. "You cannot use that. That is inadmissible. You provoked me. I warned you I was recording. You threatened to ruin my career if I did not help you cover up the theft of $2 million. I stepped forward, forcing him to retreat another step away from my vehicle. "Tomorrow morning at exactly 8 o'clock, Marcus Sterling is handing that certified audit and this audio recording over to the Securities and Exchange Commission. We are also forwarding the offshore routing numbers to the Internal Revenue Service. They tend to frown upon shell companies in the Cayman Islands used to launder generation-skipping trust funds." Preston looked like he was going to vomit right there in the pristine parking lot. His arrogant facade had completely evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, desperate man who suddenly realized the game was entirely over. He raised his hands, palms facing outward in a weak gesture of surrender. "Chloe, please. We can make a deal. I can pay back the money. I just need time." "You are going to federal prison, Preston," I said, my voice low and absolute. "You are going to lose your luxury car, your country club membership, and your freedom. And when the federal investigators start asking questions, Serena is going to throw you under the bus to save herself. You know she will. She will claim you manipulated her into signing those phantom vendor invoices to protect her brand. You are going to take the fall for all of it." The valet finally brought my car, pulling it up to the curb with cautious precision. I walked around Preston, who was now staring blankly at the asphalt, his chest heaving with shallow, panicked breaths. I opened the driver's side door and paused, looking at him over the roof of the car. "Do not ever threaten me again," I said. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove away, leaving the respected investment CEO standing completely alone and ruined in the parking lot. The drive away from the Oakwood Country Club was the quietest 20 minutes of my life. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel while the adrenaline slowly drained from my system, replaced by a cold mechanical focus. I had left Preston Blackwood hyperventilating in the parking lot, and I had shattered my parents' fake high society image over a plate of expensive crab cakes. But as the miles rolled by, a nagging discrepancy began to pull at the back of my mind. The math was bothering me. Marcus Sterling and I had traced the $2 million directly to the Cayman Islands. We had the wire transfer receipts and the shell company incorporation documents. Yet something about the mechanics of the theft felt wrong. I knew the exact stipulations of my grandfather's trust. He had designed it to be an impenetrable fortress. The liquid cash reserves were strictly capped at $500,000 to prevent reckless spending. So where did Preston get $2 million in raw cash to funnel offshore? I needed someone who understood the dark, predatory side of corporate law better than anyone else in the city. I needed Evelyn Vance. At 7 o'clock the next morning, I stepped out of the elevator on the 42nd floor of one of the most prestigious law firms in Manhattan. Evelyn Vance was a senior partner, a brilliant black woman who had mentored me since my first day as a junior wealth analyst. She was ruthless, precise, and legendary for tearing arrogant corporate executives to shreds in the courtroom. She had taught me how to navigate rooms full of men who constantly underestimated me. When I walked into her corner office, she was already sitting behind her massive glass desk, reviewing a contract. She did not even look up as I dropped the heavy black binder onto the glass. I assume the country club brunch was eventful. Evelyn said, her voice smooth and commanding. She closed her laptop and finally looked at me, her sharp, dark eyes assessing my posture. "You look like a woman who just started a war, Chloe." "I started a war, but Preston Blackwood escalated it," I replied, pulling my phone from my bag. I played the audio recording of Preston threatening to fabricate compliance violations and destroy my career. Evelyn listened to the entire exchange without blinking. When Preston's panicked voice finally cut out, she smiled. It was a terrifying, predatory smile. "He is incredibly stupid," Evelyn noted, leaning back in her leather chair. "Extortion and witness tampering. We will hand this over to the federal prosecutor when the time is right. But you did not come here at 7 in the morning just to play me a parking lot confession. You found a gap in the paper trail." I nodded, opening the binder to the red tab Marcus and I had flagged. "The trust structure requires dual authorization for any liquid transfer over $100,000. I explained, tracing the lines of data with my pen. Preston somehow bypassed my signature. He authorized a $2 million transfer using Serena as a shadow director. But the trust did not have $2 million in liquid cash. Grandfather kept the majority of the wealth tied up in aggressive municipal bonds and long-term index funds. Preston could not have liquidated those without triggering a massive tax event and alerting the entire board. So how did he get the money? Evelyn leaned forward, pulling the spreadsheets toward her. She pulled a pair of reading glasses from her pocket and began analyzing the transaction codes. Her eyes darted rapidly across the columns of numbers, her mind working at a frightening speed. After 3 minutes of absolute silence, she tapped a manicured fingernail against a seemingly insignificant alphanumeric routing code buried at the bottom of page 40. "He did not liquidate the bonds, Chloe," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "He took out a leverage loan." I stared at her, feeling a sudden icy chill run down my spine. "A leverage loan?" I asked, leaning over the desk to look at the code. "You cannot take out a loan against a generation-skipping trust. The bylaws explicitly forbid using the principal assets as collateral for personal debt." "He did not classify it as personal debt," Evelyn countered, pulling up an offshore banking portal on her secondary monitor. She rapidly typed in the routing numbers from the binder, crossing referencing the data with international banking registries. "Your grandfather was a genius, but he left one tiny loophole. He built his wealth in real estate. He left a legacy clause in the trust that allows the administrator to secure commercial lines of credit strictly for the maintenance and structural development of existing family properties." The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with sickening clarity. Preston had exploited the real estate maintenance clause. He had walked into an offshore bank, presented himself as the financial manager of the Harrison estate, and requested a massive commercial line of credit. He claimed the $2 million was for property development. Then he immediately funneled that borrowed money into his Cayman Island shell company and used it to pay off Serena's credit cards and fund his own lavish lifestyle. But an offshore commercial loan of that magnitude requires a hard asset guarantee. I said, my heart pounding furiously against my ribs. A bank does not just hand over $2 million without collateral. What did he leverage? What did he put up to secure the loan? Evelyn was already typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she pulled the public property records attached to the offshore loan covenant. The document loaded onto the large screen, casting a harsh white light across the dark office. We both stared at the digital deed attached to the debt. I felt the breath leave my lungs entirely. The room seemed to spin. He used the Brooklyn brownstone. Evelyn stated, her voice heavy with realization. The generational crown jewel. The historic 100-year-old estate in Brooklyn Heights. It was the very first property my grandfather had ever purchased. He had worked 3 blue-collar jobs to buy that building. My father was born in that house. It was the physical anchor of the Harrison family history, representing a century of struggle, survival, and ultimate triumph. It was worth at least $5 million on the open market, and it was completely paid off. Until now. If Preston defaulted on the loan, the offshore bank had the legal right to seize the property. And because I had just frozen all the trust accounts to stop the embezzlement, Preston no longer had access to the funds required to make the monthly loan payments. Serena's fake luxury boutique was bankrupt. Preston's personal credit was destroyed. They had absolutely no way to pay the debt. Evelyn looked at me, her expression grim. "Chloe," she said softly, "the primary accounts are locked. The loan payment is going to bounce by the end of the week. When it defaults, the bank will initiate immediate foreclosure proceedings. They are going to take the estate." Preston had not just stolen their money. He had gambled away our entire family legacy. If I did not figure out how to untangle this illegal offshore leverage loan, my grandfather's greatest achievement was going to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. I left Evelyn's office with the weight of my grandfather's legacy pressing down on my chest. The Brooklyn brownstone was not just real estate, it was the physical anchor of the Harrison family history. Knowing Preston had casually gambled it away to pay for his vanity projects made my blood run absolutely cold. I spent the rest of the week barricaded in my apartment, drafting legal injunctions and working with Evelyn to freeze the offshore collateral transfer. By Friday evening, a torrential downpour had swept over the city, matching the dark storm brewing in my mind. The relentless drumming of the rain against my windows was the only sound in my apartment until the sharp, aggressive buzz of my intercom shattered the silence. I glanced at the security monitor and froze. Standing in the poorly lit vestibule of my building, dripping wet and looking entirely out of place, were my father, Marcus, my mother, Helena, and my sister, Serena. They were huddled together, shivering in their damp designer coats. My mother was clutching a flimsy plastic grocery bag to her chest like a shield. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to just unplug the monitor and go to sleep, but ignoring them would only delay the inevitable confrontation. I pressed the buzzer and waited by my front door. When I pulled the door open, the 3 of them stood in the hallway looking like drowned rats. The arrogant superiority they had paraded around the country club brunch was completely gone. In its place was a carefully constructed picture of absolute misery. My mother stepped forward first, shivering violently as she pushed wet strands of hair out of her eyes. "Chloe, please let us in," she pleaded, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "We are freezing and we just want to talk. We brought a peace offering." She held out the plastic bag. I looked down and saw a crushed cardboard box containing a generic store-bought cherry pie. The bright yellow discount sticker was still slapped across the plastic wrap, proudly advertising its $5 clearance price. I stared at the pie, and then looked up at the 3 people who had spent my entire life draining our family wealth to maintain a facade of absolute luxury. A $5 clearance pie. I said, my voice perfectly flat, echoing in the narrow hallway. "You are currently facing federal wire fraud charges and the total collapse of your social standing, and you thought a discount baked good would smooth things over. This is exactly like my college graduation, is it not? You bought me a used textbook with highlighted pages as a graduation gift, but you bought Serena a brand new BMW the very next day just for passing her real estate exam, which she never even used." Serena flinched, crossing her arms defensively. "You do not have to throw the past in our faces, Chloe. We are trying to make things right. We came all the way over here in a massive storm because we want to heal this family." I stepped back and gestured for them to enter. If they wanted to play this game, I was going to let them dig their hole all the way to the center of the earth. They filed into my living room, dripping rainwater onto my hardwood floors. My father stood near the sofa, wringing his hands nervously, while my mother placed the sad little pie on my kitchen counter. We know things got out of hand at the country club. My father began refusing to meet my eyes. Emotions were running high. You have to understand, Chloe, we were just shocked by your aggressive approach. But we have had time to calm down and talk things over with Preston. My mother immediately stepped up beside him, nodding vigorously. Her eyes were already filling with large, dramatic tears, perfectly cued for maximum sympathy. We want to be a family again, Chloe. We do not want this hostility between us. Your father and I have not slept in days. We are just so heartbroken that our daughters are fighting. We want to heal the family and move past this terrible misunderstanding. I leaned against the wall watching the performance unfold. A misunderstanding, I repeated. You consider embezzling $2 million a misunderstanding. Preston made a small mistake, Serena interjected, her voice rising with desperate urgency. He got in over his head with some investments, and he just needed temporary capital to float his portfolio. It was a bridge loan, Chloe. That is all it was. He was going to put the money back as soon as his offshore accounts yielded a return. He is a brilliant financial mind. He just hit a rough patch. A rough patch? I said, pushing away from the wall. He funneled trust money through a Cayman Island shell company to pay off your luxury credit cards, Serena. He paid for his sports car lease and your exorbitant country club fees. There were no investments. There was no bridge loan. He stole the cash to fund your fake life. My father stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Chloe, please. Preston admitted he was wrong. He is incredibly remorseful. He is willing to sign a promissory note to the trust. But you have to unlock the emergency funds right now. We just need you to release the liquidity so we can pay off Preston's small mistake and satisfy the bank. Once the accounts are unlocked, we can sweep this whole thing under the rug and go back to normal. We can be a family again. The sheer audacity of their request was staggering. They had not come here to apologize. They had not come here to heal the family. They had come here because the loan default was looming, and they were desperate for a bailout. They wanted me to release the restricted emergency funds, the only cash they had not yet managed to steal, so they could pay the offshore bank and save their own skins. They were asking me to commit a massive fiduciary breach to cover up their crime. I looked at my mother, wiping her fake tears. I looked at my sister, trying to disguise her greed as anxiety. I looked at my father, attempting to command a room he had absolutely no authority in. They still thought I was the obedient, dutiful paper pusher they could manipulate with guilt and a $5 pie. You want me to commit federal fraud to save Preston? I asked, making sure my voice was loud and clear. You want me to unlock the emergency reserves to pay off an illegal offshore loan? My mother rushed forward, grabbing my hands. It is not fraud, Chloe. It is family business. We handle our own problems. Just unlock the accounts. Please. Do this for us, and we promise we will never treat you badly again. We will respect you. We will include you. Just save us, Chloe. I looked down at her, hands gripping mine. The desperation in her touch was almost pathetic. I slowly pulled my hands away, taking a deliberate step back. The cold, mechanical focus I had felt in Evelyn's office returned, settling over me like a suit of armor. I looked at the three of them standing in my living room, completely oblivious to the trap they had just walked into. They thought the worst thing Preston had done was steal the cash. They had absolutely no idea what he had used as collateral, and I was about to blow their entire world apart all over again. I watched my mother bury her face in her hands, sobbing with such theatrical precision it belonged on a Broadway stage. My father hovered over her, patting her shoulder while shooting me looks of profound disappointment. I was just about to tell them about the Brooklyn brownstone. I was just about to watch their arrogant faces crumble when I realized something was wrong. The living room felt too quiet. The dynamic was off. I scanned the room. My father was right there. My mother was weeping into her hands. Serena was gone. She had been standing right behind them when they walked in, shivering in her soaking wet designer trench coat. Now she had simply vanished into the layout of my apartment. A cold spike of adrenaline hit my bloodstream. I did not say a word to my parents. I just turned my back on my mother's fake tears and walked down the hallway toward my home office. The heavy oak door was pushed open just a crack. A sliver of blue light from my dual monitors spilled out into the dark hallway. I pushed the door open silently. Serena was leaning over my glass desk. Her soaking wet coat was dripping rainwater all over my pristine workspace. In her trembling hand, she held a silver USB drive. She was frantically jamming it into the side port of my secure wealth management laptop. Her eyes were darting rapidly across the screen as a password override prompt flashed in bright red letters. They had not come here to apologize. The $5 pie, the tears, the desperate begging to heal the family, it was all a meticulously coordinated distraction. They knew I would never willingly unlock the emergency trust reserves, so they decided to steal my administrative access and do it themselves. Having trouble finding the port Serena, I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Serena gasped violently, dropping the USB drive onto the glass desk. It clattered loudly, echoing in the tense silence. She spun around, her eyes wide with caught panic. "Chloe, I was just looking for a tissue," she stammered, taking a clumsy step back. "I thought this was the bathroom. The bathroom has white tiles and a shower," I replied, walking slowly into the room. "This room has my corporate hardware. Hardware you are currently trying to breach with a keylogger drive to steal my fiduciary passwords." I did not yell. I did not scream. The betrayal was too deep for noise. I walked right past her and calmly ripped the power cord from the wall. I closed the laptop with a sharp, definitive snap. "You always were the distraction artist," I noted, slipping the laptop under my arm. "Just like when we were teenagers and you pretended to have a panic attack so Mom and Dad would miss my high school award ceremony. You needed the attention then. Now you just need the money." My parents appeared in the doorway. My mother's theatrical tears had vanished completely, leaving behind a hard, panicked expression. My father looked from me to Serena and then to the silver USB drive sitting on my desk. The silence was absolute. No one tried to spin another lie. The evidence of their ultimate betrayal was sitting right there in the open. "You used my mother's fake crying to try and hack a licensed financial administrator," I said, turning to face the three of them. "You broke into my home office. You attempted corporate espionage to cover up $2 million in offshore embezzlement. Chloe, please listen to me." My father started stepping into the office. "We had no choice. You backed us into a corner. We just needed the master passwords to fix Preston's mistake. If you had just cooperated, we would not have had to resort to this." "It is always my fault, is it not?" I asked, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my chest. "You steal, you lie, you extort, and somehow I am the one forcing your hand. You did not come here to heal anything. You came here to rob me." Serena crossed her arms, trying to summon her usual arrogant defiance. "You are being paranoid, Chloe. I was just trying to charge my phone." "Charge your phone," I repeated, a cold smile touching my lips. "With a USB drive running a decryption script. I work for the top wealth management firm in the city, Serena. Do you think our IT department does not flag unauthorized external drives the second they touch the port? You just triggered a security protocol that sent an alert directly to Evelyn Vance." Serena's face drained of all color. My father took a step backward, his arrogant posture collapsing. "Get out," I said. My voice was a low, warning growl. "We are not leaving until we sort this out," my mother demanded, stepping forward, her voice shrill with panic. "You are going to open that laptop and you are going to transfer the emergency funds. You owe this family. We gave you everything." I stepped right into my mother's personal space. "I owe this family nothing," I whispered, staring directly into her eyes. "And you have exactly 10 seconds to get out of my apartment before I call building security and have you dragged out in handcuffs for attempted corporate theft." They saw the absolute finality in my eyes. The bluff was over. The fake apologies were done. My father grabbed my mother's arm, pulling her back. "Come on, Helena. We are leaving." They shuffled out of the office and down the hallway. I followed them, making sure they walked straight out the front door. They stepped back out into the freezing rain, the heavy mahogany door standing between us. "You are making a massive mistake, Chloe," my father yelled over the sound of the downpour. "You are destroying your own blood." "You destroyed yourselves," I replied. I grabbed the crushed $5 cherry pie from the kitchen counter and tossed it into the hallway so it landed right at their soaking wet feet. "Take your garbage with you." I slammed the door shut and locked the deadbolt. The click of the heavy metal lock felt like a starting pistol. The battle lines were no longer drawn in passive-aggressive comments at holiday dinners. They had actively tried to destroy my career and steal my corporate identity. The war was officially on. They thought they could break into my home and force my hand. They still thought they were dealing with the quiet dropout who would eventually fold under family pressure. They had no idea that while they were trying to steal my passwords, I already possessed the document that proved Preston had leveraged the Brooklyn brownstone. I had the kill shot. And tomorrow morning, Marcus Sterling and I were going to pull the trigger. The sun had barely crested the Manhattan skyline when I walked into the conference room at my firm. Evelyn Vance was already there, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows with a cup of black coffee. Marcus Sterling, my firm compliance director, sat at the head of the long oak table reviewing the final injunction documents. We did not waste time with pleasantries. I handed Evelyn the security logs from my apartment network confirming Serena's attempted breach with the keylogger drive. Evelyn's face remained impassive, but her eyes sharpened with predatory anticipation. It was one thing to embezzle offshore funds, but attempting a cyber breach on a licensed financial institution elevated their crimes to a federal level. We finalized the freeze on all secondary accounts. The offshore bank holding the leverage loan against the Brooklyn brownstone was officially notified of the fraudulent collateral. The trap was set, and the jaws were about to snap shut. But my parents lived in a state of terminal delusion. They operated under the assumption that reality was flexible as long as you had the right last name. I assumed the freezing of their assets and the imminent foreclosure of our ancestral estate would force them into hiding. I assumed they would be frantically calling defense attorneys. I was completely wrong. Instead of preparing for federal indictments, my mother and father were preparing for a party. It was their 35th wedding anniversary. For months, my mother had been meticulously planning a lavish gala at the Grand Astor Hotel. It was meant to be the social event of the season, a glittering display of the Harrison family wealth and influence. 500 guest champagne towers, imported orchids, and a 10-course catered dinner. I knew exactly how much an event of that magnitude cost. The deposit alone was $200,000. With the trust locked down and their personal accounts frozen, I had assumed the gala was canceled. They literally did not have a dime to their names. By noon, I received an automated alert from a credit monitoring service attached to the family estate. My jaw tightened as I read the notification. My father had bypassed traditional banking entirely. In a desperate bid to keep up appearances and fund his extravagant anniversary gala, he had turned to a shadow lender. He had taken out a predatory high-interest bridge loan with terms so aggressive it amounted to financial suicide. He had borrowed $500,000 at an astronomical 30% interest rate using the remaining equity in their personal vehicles and my mother's jewelry collection as collateral. They were drowning in offshore debt, facing federal prison, and yet they were still throwing a party. They were doing it because they believed they still held the ultimate trump card: me. They honestly believed that if they cornered me in public, surrounded by 500 members of their elite social circle, I would fold. They thought the pressure of keeping up the family facade would force me to pull out my laptop and unlock the emergency trust reserves right there at the banquet table. They were banking their entire future and the predatory loan they just signed on their ability to bully me into submission. My phone vibrated on the glass desk. The screen lit up with a message from my father. I picked it up and read the hostile words. "You will attend the gala tonight. You will release the funds immediately and fix this mess. If you humiliate us or refuse to unlock the accounts, you are dead to us." I stared at the screen. The sheer arrogance of the threat was breathtaking. He was not asking for a favor. He was delivering a final ultimatum. He genuinely believed that the threat of being disowned would terrify me into compliance. He thought being dead to the Harrison family was a punishment. He did not realize it was the exact liberation I had been fighting for. I set the phone down and opened the digital invitation that had been sitting in my inbox for months. I clicked the button and officially RSVP'd yes. I typed a brief reply to my father. I will be there. I was not going to hide in my apartment. I was not going to let them control the narrative or paint me as the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family on their anniversary. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. I was going to attend their beautiful, expensive party. But I was not coming alone. I looked across the conference table at Evelyn Vance. She caught my eye and gave a single decisive nod. It was time to bring in the heavy artillery. I picked up my phone and dialed the direct line to Special Agent Reynolds, an IRS liaison I had worked with extensively during complex international compliance audits. He had been quietly monitoring the Cayman Island Shell Company since Marcus Sterling first flagged the anomalous wire transfers. I informed him that the primary suspects of the $2 million embezzlement and the fraudulent offshore commercial loan were hosting a highly publicized gala at the Grand Astor Hotel that evening. I provided him with the precise location, the guest list, and the timeline. Then I contacted an independent forensic audit team. These were the ruthless numbers men who specialized in untangling corporate fraud and seizing assets in real time. I authorized them to begin drafting the immediate foreclosure notices and the asset seizure protocols. I wanted the paperwork ready to be served the exact second the clock struck midnight. My parents had designed this gala to be the crowning achievement of their social lives. They wanted a captive audience. They wanted a public spectacle. They wanted to force my hand under the bright lights of the hotel ballroom. I was going to oblige them. I left the office early to prepare. I chose a sleek floor-length black gown. It was elegant, severe, and entirely unapologetic. It was not a dress for celebrating. It was a dress for a funeral. Because tonight, the fake glittering empire my family had built on lies and stolen money was going to die. And I was going to be the one holding the shovel. I stepped out of the black town car and handed the valet my ticket. The torrential rain had finally stopped, leaving the Manhattan streets slick and reflecting the flashing lights of the city. I walked through the revolving brass doors of the Grand Astor Hotel and stepped into the main lobby. The air was immediately thick with the scent of imported white orchids and expensive perfume. My parents had rented the Imperial Ballroom. It was the largest and most exclusive space in the entire hotel. I bypassed the coat check and walked directly toward the grand double doors flanked by private security. I pushed the heavy mahogany doors open and stepped onto the plush crimson carpet of the ballroom. The sheer scale of the financial delusion in front of me was staggering. My parents had gathered 200 of the city's most influential black elite. Politicians, real estate moguls, hedge fund managers, and legacy families were mingling under massive crystal chandeliers. Waiters in pristine white jackets circulated with silver trays of vintage champagne and caviar. The tables were draped in heavy silk and adorned with towering floral centerpieces. It was a masterpiece of high society theater. Every single napkin, every crystal glass, and every drop of champagne was paid for by a predatory shadow loan with a 30% interest rate. My father had literally mortgaged the last remaining shreds of his dignity just to put on a show. I did not wait in the shadows. I did not slip into a corner to observe. I squared my shoulders and marched straight down the center aisle of the ballroom. My black gown swept silently across the carpet. People began to turn as I passed. The conversations nearest to me faltered and died out, replaced by a ripple of whispers. They recognized me. I was the Harrison daughter who had supposedly turned her back on the family legacy, the ungrateful dropout who managed spreadsheets instead of running a luxury lifestyle brand. I kept my chin high and my eyes locked forward. My heels clicked a steady rhythmic beat against the sections of exposed marble floor. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman arriving to collect a debt. At the far end of the room, my father stood on a raised dais behind a glass podium. He was tapping a silver spoon against his champagne flute, demanding the attention of the room. The low hum of conversation faded into respectful silence as 200 faces turned toward the stage. My friends, my colleagues, my family. Marcus Sterling projected his voice with the polished, practiced ease of a man who believed his own lies. 35 years ago, Helena and I built a foundation based on trust, loyalty, and vision. We built an empire that has weathered every storm. But a legacy is only as strong as the people who protect it. I paused near the edge of the dance floor, perfectly illuminated by the perimeter lighting. From here, I had a clear view of the VIP family table situated directly below the stage. Serena was sitting there wearing a diamond necklace that cost more than my annual salary. She was twisting her cloth napkin into a tight knot, her knuckles stark white. Beside her sat Preston. The arrogant investment CEO looked physically ill. His custom tuxedo hung awkwardly on his frame, and a thick layer of sweat coated his forehead. He was gripping his water glass so tightly I thought it might shatter in his hand. They both looked terrified. And tonight I want to raise a special glass to the man who has secured our financial future. My father continued extending his champagne flute toward the VIP table. My son-in-law, Preston Blackwood. Preston has navigated turbulent economic waters with brilliant precision. He is the savior of the Harrison family financial legacy. Through his shrewd investments and steadfast dedication, he has ensured that our historic Brooklyn estate will remain in this family for another 100 years. The hypocrisy of his words was so dense it was suffocating. Preston had not secured the estate. He had used it as illegal collateral to fund his own vanity, and the offshore bank was currently preparing the foreclosure documents. The crowd applauded politely, raising their glasses toward Preston. Preston managed a weak, trembling smile and gave a stiff nod. Then my father looked up from the VIP table and saw me standing in the center aisle. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a fraction of a second, his confident mask slipped, revealing the desperate, panicked man beneath. But Marcus Sterling was a performer. He recovered, instantly realizing he had the ultimate home field advantage. He was standing on a stage holding a microphone surrounded by 200 of his peers. He thought I would never dare cause a scene in front of the city's elite. He thought he could use the crushing weight of public expectation to bully me into complete submission. He leaned closer to the microphone, his voice echoing loudly through the massive ballroom. And speaking of family coming together, I see we have a late arrival, my father announced, gesturing widely in my direction. The entire room turned as one massive entity to look at me. The spotlight swung slightly, casting a harsh beam directly onto my face. My prodigal daughter Chloe has finally decided to join us. He said, his tone dripping with patronizing affection. He was painting a picture for the crowd, setting the narrative before I could even speak. We all know that families have their disagreements. We all know that younger generations sometimes rebel against the wisdom of their elders. Chloe has always been fiercely independent, sometimes to her own detriment. But the beautiful thing about the Harrison legacy is that we always leave the door open for forgiveness. He stepped out from behind the podium, walking to the edge of the stage. He looked down at me, his eyes hard and unyielding, delivering his final public ultimatum. Chloe, you have spent the last few weeks creating unnecessary hurdles for this family. You have let pride cloud your judgment. But you are here tonight, and that tells me you have finally come to your senses. He held out his hand, palm facing upward. So let us show everyone here tonight that we are a united front. Step forward, Chloe. Come up to this table and hand over the administrative access card to the trust. Transfer the emergency reserves to Preston so he can finalize our investments. Do your duty for this family right here, right now, and all will be forgiven. The ballroom was dead silent. 200 people were staring at me, waiting for the rebellious daughter to fold under the pressure of her powerful father. He had trapped me perfectly. He had demanded my surrender in front of the entire world. I looked at his outstretched hand. I looked at Preston's sweating face. I looked at Serena shrinking into her chair. I reached into my clutch and let my fingers brush against the cold plastic of the access card. Then I smiled. I withdrew my empty hand, leaving the access card safely zipped inside the silk lining of my clutch. I did not say a word as I ascended the short flight of velvet-covered stairs to the stage. Marcus was beaming. He thought he had won. He thought the crushing weight of 200 elite sets of eyes had broken my resolve. He held out his hand, expectant and victorious, ready to accept the physical key to my corporate authority. I walked right past his outstretched palm and smoothly lifted the heavy silver microphone from its stand. His smile vanished instantly, replaced by a flicker of absolute panic. I looked out over the sea of faces. 200 of the most powerful people in the city were staring back at me. I could see federal judges, hedge fund managers, and legacy socialites sitting at their heavily decorated tables. They were waiting for a display of family unity. They were waiting for the obedient daughter to yield to the patriarch. I was about to give them a financial autopsy instead. "My father is absolutely right," I began, my voice echoing crystal clear through the state-of-the-art sound system. "A legacy is only as strong as the people who protect it. And transparency is the cornerstone of any great financial institution. So, in the spirit of absolute transparency, I think it is only fair that we show everyone exactly how Preston Blackwood has been managing the Harrison family legacy." I looked up toward the darkened balcony at the back of the room. I caught the eye of the lead audiovisual technician. I had paid him $10,000 in cash 2 hours before the event to completely ignore my father's run of show and wait for my direct signal. I gave him a single subtle nod. The massive digital screens flanking the stage had been displaying a looping slideshow of my parents' vintage wedding photos. Instantly, the screens went pitch black. A collective murmur rippled through the ballroom. Then the massive monitors blazed to life with stark high-definition spreadsheets, bank statements, and forensic audit dashboards. The text was massive, impossible to miss. I pointed to the screen on my left. "Let us begin with Preston's brilliant investments," I said, my voice projecting a cold, relentless authority. "What you are looking at are certified wire transfers from the Harrison Emergency Trust. $2 million funneled directly into a Cayman Island shell company called Blackwood Holdings." A sharp gasp erupted from a table near the front. The hedge fund managers in the room immediately recognized the offshore routing numbers and the signature formatting of a corporate embezzlement scheme. I saw several wealthy attendees leaning forward, squinting at the glaring red figures in absolute disbelief. I clicked a small remote in my hand, advancing the slide. The screen shifted to a detailed breakdown of personal expenditures. "And here is where that money actually went," I continued, ensuring every syllable rang through the silent room. "Not into high-yield bonds or real estate portfolios. It went to pay off Serena Blackwood's luxury credit cards. $700,000 in unauthorized transfers to cover designer clothing, private jets, and exorbitant country club fees." "Chloe, stop this right now," my father hissed, lunging toward me. He looked frantic, his perfectly styled hair falling into his eyes. "Cut the feed," he yelled up at the audiovisual booth. "Cut the damn feed right now." The technician ignored him completely. I took a calculated step back, keeping the microphone entirely out of my father's reach. I was not finished, and the crowd was absolutely captivated. The polite, attentive silence had morphed into a stunned, horrified quiet. No one was drinking their vintage champagne. No one was touching their imported caviar. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen displayed the most damning document of all, the shadow loan agreement with the signature clearly magnified. And finally, I announced, my voice ringing out like a death knell. For anyone wondering how tonight's lavish 35th anniversary gala was funded, please direct your attention to the screens. Because my father drained his personal accounts to cover up Preston's theft, he had to take out a predatory bridge loan yesterday morning to pay for your dinner. He borrowed $500,000 at a 30% interest rate, using his last remaining assets as collateral. The ballroom erupted. The illusion was completely shattered. These were people who understood money, who worshipped wealth and despised financial incompetence. To them, being broke was a quiet tragedy, but being reckless and stupid was an unforgivable sin. They were looking at my parents not with respect, but with profound disgust. They suddenly realized they were sitting in a room eating food bought with loan shark money. The social annihilation was instantaneous and absolute. My mother let out a shrill, horrifying wail and collapsed into her chair, hiding her face in her hands as her elite friends openly stared at her in pity and revulsion. Serena was frozen solid, her mouth hanging open as she stared at her own massive credit card debt broadcasted to her entire social circle. Preston looked like he was about to physically vomit. He had his head buried in his hands, realizing his career in finance was permanently over. My father stood on the stage, shaking with a rage so violent he could barely draw breath. "You ruined us," he whispered, his voice trembling with venom. "You ruined the Harrison name." "I did not ruin anything," I replied, speaking directly into the microphone so the entire room could hear my final verdict. "You ruined yourselves with your greed and your arrogance. You tried to extort me. You tried to force me to commit federal fraud to save your fake empire. But the Harrison name does not belong to you anymore. I am the only one protecting it." I looked down at Preston and Serena, then turned my cold gaze back to my father. "By the way, I have already forwarded all these documents to the IRS and a federal compliance board. Enjoy the rest of your party." I opened my hand and dropped the silver microphone. It hit the wooden stage floor with a loud, resonant thud that echoed sharply through the stunned ballroom. I turned my back on my father and walked down the velvet stairs. The sea of elite guests parted for me silently, stepping aside to let me pass. No one said a word. The glittering empire my parents had spent 35 years building was dead and buried. I walked straight out of the grand double doors, leaving them to drown in the wreckage of their own making. I walked straight out of the grand double doors, leaving them to drown in the wreckage of their own making. But before the heavy mahogany panels could swing completely shut behind me, the sheer volume of the panic echoing from the ballroom forced me to pause. I stood in the marble foyer, the cool air of the lobby, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of the gala. Through the narrowing gap between the doors, I watched the final desperate death throes of the Harrison family. The silence that had gripped the room was shattering into a chaotic roar. High society did not tolerate public humiliation, and the guests were frantically scrambling to distance themselves from the blast radius. Federal judges were discreetly signaling their security details. Hedge fund managers were already walking briskly toward the exits, pulling their wives by the arm. A waiter near the front dropped a silver tray of champagne glasses, and the shattering crystal echoed like gunfire. The exodus was immediate and brutal. My father realized his entire social universe was evaporating right in front of his eyes. The sheer desperation kicked in, stripping away decades of polished aristocratic charm. He needed a scapegoat. He needed someone to absorb the fatal blow so he could survive the fallout. He spun around on the stage, his eyes frantically scanning the room until they locked onto Preston. "He manipulated us!" My father shouted, his voice raw and echoing without the microphone. He pointed a trembling finger directly at his son-in-law. "We had absolutely no idea. This man is a criminal. He abused our trust. We trusted him to manage our private portfolio, and he embezzled from his own wife. He lied to this entire family." My mother immediately caught on to the survival strategy. She dropped her hands from her tear-streaked face and turned toward the fleeing guests. "We are victims here," she shrieked, grabbing the arm of a passing city councilman who violently shook her off. "Preston orchestrated this entire scheme. He promised us high-yield returns. He manipulated our finances while we were completely blind to his illegal activities. He is a monster." Serena was backing away from her husband, her designer heels stumbling over the thick carpet. She looked at Preston with wide, terrified eyes, playing the role of the deceived spouse perfectly. "How could you?" she cried out, her voice trembling. "How could you do this to us?" They were throwing him to the wolves. They were ready to watch him burn in federal prison if it meant they could salvage even a fraction of their elite status. They honestly believed they could spin the narrative, play the victims, and walk away clean. But Preston Blackwood was not a sacrificial lamb. The sickly, terrified sweat that had coated Preston's face moments ago vanished. The absolute panic in his eyes hardened into something incredibly dark and vicious. As he watched my parents frantically trying to feed him to the authorities, a low, guttural sound escaped his throat. He started to laugh. It was not a nervous chuckle. It was a cold, malicious belly laugh that cut right through the chaotic noise of the ballroom. The sheer sociopathic nature of that laugh made several guests stop in their tracks, turning back to watch the spectacle. Preston reached up and casually straightened his custom silk bow tie. "You did not know?" Preston asked, his voice dripping with venomous amusement. He took a slow, deliberate step toward the stage where my father was standing. "You are going to stand there in front of the mayor and the board of directors and claim you had absolutely no idea where the money was coming from. You are a pathological liar," Marcus screamed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "I will have my lawyers draft the indictments myself. I will see you rot in a federal cell." Preston did not flinch. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his tailored tuxedo jacket. His hand emerged holding a folded piece of heavy stock paper. He held it up in the harsh light of the chandeliers. "You authorized the offshore transfers, Marcus," Preston said, his voice projecting clearly across the room. "You needed the cash liquidity to keep your country club memberships active and to pay the lease on your luxury vehicles. You knew exactly what I was doing. You both did." Lies, my mother wailed, gripping the edge of the VIP table. "Do not listen to him. He is trying to take us down with him." "Am I?" Preston asked, his smile stretching into a cruel predator grin. "Because this document right here is a certified copy of the master loan agreement from the shadow lender. The exact same predatory loan that funded this little anniversary party tonight." He walked right up to the edge of the stage and shoved the paper up toward my father. "Take a good look at the bottom of the page, Marcus." Preston sneered. "You signed as the primary guarantors. You and Helena both. You bypassed traditional banking because your personal credit was completely vaporized. You signed a high-interest shadow loan with illegal offshore entities because no legitimate bank would even look at you." My father stumbled backward as if he had been physically struck. "No," he stammered. "We only signed a temporary bridge document. You said the trust access would cover it. You said it was a standard collateral hold." Preston laughed again, folding the paper and slipping it back into his pocket. "I said a lot of things, Marcus. But the shadow bank only cares about signatures, and your signatures are on the deed transfer." My mother let out a horrific gasping sound. "What deed transfer?" she choked out, her knees buckling slightly. "You leveraged the Brooklyn brownstone," Preston announced, his voice ringing with absolute triumph. "You put the ancestral estate up as collateral because you were flat broke. You bet the entire Harrison legacy on your ability to bully Chloe into unlocking the trust funds tonight." The remaining guests in the room gasped in unison. Leveraging a generational estate to pay for a party was the ultimate taboo in their circle. It was the absolute height of financial incompetence. "If the feds take me down on wire fraud tonight, those offshore accounts stay frozen forever." Preston continued, his eyes locking onto my parents' horrified faces. "Which means you default on the loan. And when you default on a 30% shadow loan, they do not send a polite letter asking for a meeting." Preston's smile faded, leaving a mask of pure, calculated malice. "They take the house." He whispered the words carrying clearly in the dead silent room. "The bank seizes the Brooklyn estate this Tuesday. You are legally bound to my fraud, Marcus. If I go down, the Harrison House of Cards collapses with me, and you will be sleeping on the street by Wednesday morning." My father dropped to his knees on the stage, his chest heaving as he stared down at Preston. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably, gripping Serena's arm as they both realized the absolute terror of their reality. I stood in the doorway watching the elite society walk out on them, leaving them trapped in the nightmare they had built. The trap had closed perfectly. The faint, soft, glowing rectangles of mobile phones began to multiply across the massive ballroom. The collective silence was suddenly punctuated by the rapid staccato clicks of camera shutters and the soft chime of recording notifications. The elite guests, the people my parents had spent decades courting, flattering, and bribing with lavish parties, were not looking away in polite discomfort. They were zooming in. The hedge fund managers, the politicians, and the legacy socialites were actively live streaming the absolute destruction of the Harrison family empire. They were documenting every second of the spectacular financial implosion to share in their exclusive group chats. Social ruin was happening in real time, and it was being broadcasted in high definition. My mother realized it the exact same moment I did. Helena Harrison was a woman who had never worn a pair of flats in her life. She was a woman who considered a wrinkled napkin to be a personal insult, and who treated her public image with the fanatic devotion of a religious zealot. Seeing her break was like watching a pristine porcelain statue shatter into 1,000 jagged pieces in slow motion. The reality of Preston's words finally pierced through her thick armor of denial. The bank was seizing the Brooklyn brownstone on Tuesday. They were going to be homeless. The pristine matriarch let out a sound that was half sob and half scream. She scrambled down from the raised VIP platform, abandoning every single ounce of her carefully cultivated dignity. Her heavy silk designer gown pooled awkwardly around her, ruining the expensive fabric as she rushed across the remaining few feet of carpet that separated us. Before I could even take a step back, my mother dropped heavily onto her knees right in front of me. She lunged forward and grabbed my legs. Her manicured hands dug desperately into the fabric of my black gown, clutching my knees like a drowning woman holding onto a life raft. Her perfectly styled hair was coming undone, falling in messy strands across her tear-streaked face. Her heavy diamond earrings swung erratically as she looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Please, Chloe," she begged, her voice cracking loudly enough for every recording smartphone to capture. "Please unlock the trust. Pay the bank. You have the administrative access card. You can authorize the emergency reserves right now. We will disown Preston. We will throw him out onto the street. We will tear up his contracts. We will do whatever you want, Chloe. Just please do not let us lose the brownstone." I looked down at the woman kneeling at my feet, the woman who had spent my entire life making me feel incredibly small. I felt absolutely nothing. There was no pity. There was no lingering childhood desire to comfort her. There was only a cold, sterile clarity. I reached down, grabbed her wrists, and firmly pried her hands off my legs. I took one deliberate step backward, forcing her to remain kneeling on the exposed floor without my support. "You will disown Preston," I asked, my voice echoing cold and detached across the silent ballroom. I looked over at the sweating, terrified man cowering near the stage. 5 minutes ago, you were raising a glass of vintage champagne to toast his absolute brilliance. 5 minutes ago, he was the savior of the Harrison legacy. You do not want to disown him because he is a thief, mother. You want to disown him because he is a thief who got caught and lost your money. Helena sobbed harder, reaching a shaking hand up toward me. "Chloe, please. It is your childhood home. It is our legacy. It is a building funded by fraudulent leverage," I corrected sharply. "And do not dare lecture me about family loyalty or legacy now. Not when you have spent 29 years making it explicitly clear exactly who mattered in this family and who was expendable." I turned my gaze to my father, who was still paralyzed on the stage, clutching his chest as he stared at the digital screens displaying his absolute ruin. I pointed a finger directly at him. "For nearly 3 decades, I watched you build a shrine to Serena. I watched you hand her every opportunity, every accolade, and every ounce of your affection simply because she played the part of the perfect, compliant socialite. You paraded her around as the heir apparent, while I was banished to the background, expected to quietly fix the spreadsheets and balance the ledgers that she was too incompetent to understand. You chose Preston and Serena for 29 years. You bet everything on a con artist because he wore a custom tuxedo and spoke with the right accent. You handed Preston the keys to the entire empire because you were too arrogant to listen to the only daughter who actually understood the math. When I tried to warn you about the offshore accounts last year, you called me jealous. You called me bitter. You told me I was socially unfit to understand high-level investments. The crowd murmured, catching every single word of the family history being laid bare. Serena let out a quiet whimper from her chair, shrinking away from the judging eyes of the guests. "Now the bill has come due," I continued, looking directly into my mother's eyes. "You want me to unlock the emergency trust. You want me to drain the very last legitimate funds this family possesses to pay off an illegal shadow loan that you signed to buy caviar for people who are currently filming your breakdown for entertainment." I reached into my clutch and pulled out the administrative access card holding the heavy plastic square up to the light. Did you really think Grandfather Theodore was that naive? I asked, my voice ringing with absolute authority. Did you honestly believe the man who built this empire from scratch would leave the keys to the kingdom unguarded? He knew exactly what you were, Marcus. He knew you cared more about country club memberships and public perception than financial stability. He knew you were weak. My father flinched as if I had physically struck him. United States trust law is incredibly explicit regarding the duties of a trustee, I explained, projecting my voice across the ballroom. A trust is not a personal slush fund. It is a legal fortress. And Grandfather Theodore built a fail-safe into the very foundation of the Harrison family trust. It is called a fiduciary breach clause. My father's face drained of all remaining color. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, without producing a single sound. He recognized the term. For those of you who do not spend your days navigating corporate litigation, I continued, keeping my eyes locked on my parents. Let me explain how this specific clause works. As primary trustees, Marcus and Helena Harrison had a legally binding fiduciary duty to protect the assets of the estate. The moment you both co-signed Preston's fraudulent shadow loans, you weaponized trust assets for illegal purposes. When you co-signed Preston's fraudulent loans using trust collateral, you committed a severe federal breach of your fiduciary duties. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. The guests were hanging on my every word, recording the flawless execution of a legal checkmate. The penalty for violating the fiduciary breach clause is not a gentle warning, I said, stepping closer to the stage. The penalty is immediate, involuntary, and irrevocable expulsion. By signing those predatory loan documents, you legally voided your own status as trustees. You stripped yourselves of all authority, all access, and all rights to the Harrison estate. Preston pushed himself off the stage, his face flushed with panicked rage. "You are bluffing," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are spouting legal garbage to scare them. It does not matter if they are expelled from the trust. The shadow bank still holds the lien. The loan is in default. The bank is seizing the brownstone on Tuesday, and there is absolutely nothing your grandfather's dead paperwork can do to stop it." I looked at Preston with pure, unadulterated contempt. "You are absolutely right, Preston," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. "The shadow bank does not care about grandfather's clauses. They only care about getting their money. They are ruthless liquidators who want their $500,000 plus 30% interest, which is exactly why I paid them." The entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing. Preston froze, his outstretched finger trembling in the air. Serena let out a sharp, shocked gasp. I monitored the wire transfers for months. I explained, pacing slowly in front of the VIP table. "I watched you drain the accounts. I watched you panic. And when I saw the shadow loan hit the ledger, I knew exactly what you had done. So yesterday morning, while you were busy picking out floral centerpieces and ordering vintage champagne for this ridiculous party, I made a phone call. I used my own private corporate assets to buy the debt. I paid off the entire banknote in full." My mother let out a loud, hysterical sob of relief. "Oh, thank God," she cried out, reaching her hands toward me. "Chloe, you saved us. You saved the house." I stared down at her, completely devoid of pity. I systematically rejected every single ounce of her desperate maternal manipulation. "I did not save you," I replied, my words cutting through her sobs like shattered glass. "I saved the asset." I turned back to the crowd, ensuring my final victory was fully documented. "The bank is not seizing the brownstone on Tuesday," I announced, "because I paid off the banknote yesterday. The trust is seizing the house. And because Marcus and Helena are legally expelled due to their fiduciary breach, there is only one person left in charge. As the sole remaining uncompromised trustee of the Harrison estate, I am calling in the debt." I looked directly into my father's terrified eyes. "I now own the estate exclusively. I own the remaining accounts. I own the legacy. And my very first act as the sole owner is to foreclose on your fraudulent debt. You have until Monday morning to pack your personal belongings and vacate my property." My father remained exactly where he was on the stage floor. His breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. He stared at me as if I had suddenly morphed into a monster he could no longer recognize. He did not understand that I was simply the mirror reflecting his own monstrous greed right back at him. I walked over to the VIP table where my mother was still trembling. I reached into my clutch one final time. I pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder sealed with a red legal sticker. I tossed it onto the center of the table right on top of a smashed crystal champagne flute and a pool of spilled vintage wine. "You have until Monday morning," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "But just so there is absolutely zero confusion about the legal reality of your situation, I brought the formal paperwork. That is a 72-hour eviction notice. It has been signed by a judge and filed with the city. You, my mother, and Serena need to pack your things." My father scrambled down from the stage, his knees hitting the marble floor as he grabbed the folder. His trembling fingers tore open the seal. He read the heavy black text and let out a strangled, pathetic noise. "You cannot do this to us!" Helena wailed, her voice echoing in the nearly empty ballroom. "Where are we supposed to go, Chloe? We do not have any cash. We do not have any credit. We cannot afford a hotel. We cannot even afford movers to pack our clothes." "Then I suggest you start finding some cardboard boxes tonight," I replied, crossing my arms. "You have hundreds of thousands of dollars in designer gowns upstairs. I am sure a pawn shop will give you enough cash to rent a moving van." Serena finally snapped out of her paralyzed state. She shot up from her chair, her diamond necklace catching the harsh light of the room. She pointed a manicured finger at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure entitlement and rage. "You are a sociopath!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "I am your sister. You cannot throw me out on the street. I have a certain standard of living to maintain. I am a Harrison." "You are a parasite," I fired back, stepping directly into her personal space. Serena recoiled, but I did not let up. "You have never worked a day in your life. You have never paid a single bill with your own money. You spent 29 years treating me like your personal assistant while you drained the family accounts to buy your status. You married a fraud because you were too lazy to look at a spreadsheet. You do not have a standard of living anymore, Serena. You are bankrupt." Serena let out a high-pitched shriek and turned wildly, looking for her husband to defend her, to fix this, to magically produce the millions he had promised. But Preston was not looking at Serena. He was not looking at my parents. He was looking at the exit. While my family had been weeping over the eviction notice, Preston had quietly backed away from the stage. He was currently slipping through the shadows near the perimeter of the ballroom, navigating around overturned chairs and abandoned silver trays. He thought the dramatic family breakdown was the perfect cover for a quiet, tactical retreat. He was heading straight for the heavy velvet-draped doors at the rear of the hall. He was trying to vanish into the Manhattan night before the reality of his embezzlement fully caught up with him. I did not shout. I did not alert my father. I simply crossed my arms and watched him run. Preston reached the massive mahogany doors. He grabbed the polished brass handle. His shoulders hunched, his face slick with a desperate, panicked sweat. He yanked the door open, throwing his weight forward to escape into the hotel lobby. He slammed directly into a wall of solid, dark suits. The doors swung wide open, revealing 4 imposing figures standing in the foyer. They were not hotel security. They were not private bouncers. They were federal agents from the Financial Crimes Division, and I had paid the hotel concierge generously to ensure they had a quiet place to wait in the lobby until my presentation was finished. Preston Blackwood, the lead agent, stated, his voice a flat, authoritative bark that cut through the ballroom. Preston stumbled backward, his hands flying up in a desperate gesture of surrender. "Wait," he stammered, his voice pitching up an octave. "There is a misunderstanding. I can explain the wire transfers. I have a legal team. I can cooperate. You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and tax evasion." The agent continued, completely ignoring Preston's frantic bargaining. He grabbed Preston's right arm, spinning him around and slamming him face first against the heavy wooden door. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut echoed loudly across the room. It was the most satisfying sound I had heard all night. No, Serena shrieked a sound so piercing and hysterical it felt like it could shatter the remaining chandeliers. She sprinted across the ballroom, her heavy silk gown dragging behind her. She threw herself at the federal agents, clawing wildly at the air as they secured her husband's wrists. "You cannot take him," she sobbed violently. "He is a CEO. We are wealthy. You cannot do this to us. Do you know who we are? Ma'am, step back right now, or you will be detained for interfering with a federal arrest," a second agent warned, stepping between Serena and Preston. Serena collapsed onto the floor, screaming hysterically, beating her fists against the expensive carpet. Her perfect life, her endless credit cards, her offshore accounts, and her private jets were all being handcuffed and read their Miranda rights right in front of her. Preston did not even look down at her. His face was pressed against the wood, his eyes wide and vacant as the agents patted him down and confiscated his phone. My parents stood frozen by the VIP table, watching their golden son-in-law being dragged out of the ballroom by the FBI. The absolute finality of the moment crushed whatever remaining hope they had clung to. There was no spinning this. There was no PR firm expensive enough to erase the image of federal agents dragging a Harrison family member out of the Grand Astor Hotel. I walked slowly up the center aisle, stopping just a few feet away from where Serena was sobbing on the floor. I looked at the three of them. My father defeated and broke. My mother weeping over a piece of eviction paper. My sister screaming for a criminal who had stolen her future. "I told you the bill always comes due," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the absolute weight of a judge delivering a final sentence. I turned around and walked out of the ballroom, the heavy mahogany doors closing firmly behind me. I stepped out into the cool Manhattan rain, leaving the Harrison legacy exactly where it belonged. In the past. 6 months evaporated, taking with them every single trace of the Harrison family illusion. The flashing cameras and federal raids of that chaotic night were swiftly replaced by a much quieter, more suffocating reality. I did not need to search for updates on my family. Their spectacular fall from grace was documented across the city gossip columns before fading entirely into the obscure misery of the working class they had always so deeply despised. The harsh, flickering fluorescent lights of a discount home goods store in Queens served as the new spotlight for my sister. Serena stood behind a scratched linoleum checkout counter, entirely unrecognizable from the arrogant socialite who used to demand vintage champagne and private drivers. She was wearing a stiff polyester uniform vest, zipped over a faded black shirt. Her hair, once maintained by elite stylists, was pulled back into a messy, uneven ponytail. Her hands, previously famous in her social circles for their weekly $300 manicures, were now raw, calloused and covered in small paper cuts from breaking down cardboard inventory boxes in the damp stockroom. She swiped a clearance price tag across the scanner. The machine let out a sharp mechanical beep that had become the relentless, agonizing metronome of her new existence. She mechanically bagged the cheap plastic items without making eye contact until a familiar voice stopped her cold. "Serena. Oh my God, is that actually you?" Serena looked up, her face rapidly draining of color. Standing across the register was Madison, a legacy heiress who had been Serena's maid of honor. Madison was clutching a designer handbag that cost more than Serena's new annual salary. The legacy heiress did not offer a look of pity or sympathy. Instead, a slow, cruel smirk spread across her perfectly contoured face. "I heard you lost the penthouse," Madison drawled loudly, ensuring the other customers waiting in line could hear every single word. "But I had no idea they let the wives of convicted felons handle the cash registers here. I guess beggars cannot be choosers." Serena shrank back, her shoulders curling inward as the remaining shreds of her pride shattered. She tried to force a polite retail smile, but her bottom lip quivered violently. Madison paid for her novelty items, tossed a crumpled dollar bill onto the counter as a degrading tip, and walked away. Before exiting the store, Madison dramatically pulled out a bottle of hand sanitizer and scrubbed her hands as if simply being near Serena had contaminated her. That was the brutal reality of the high society Serena had sacrificed me to impress. The moment Preston was indicted for wire fraud and their bank accounts were frozen, every single one of her elite friends blocked her number. She was entirely abandoned, left to drown in minimum wage retail hell while trying to pay off the massive legal debts her husband had left behind. Across the city, deep in the forgotten grimy edges of the Bronx, my parents were experiencing their own customized version of purgatory. Marcus and Helena Harrison were now confined to a cramped two-bedroom apartment situated above a noisy 24-hour laundromat. The walls of their new home were paper-thin, constantly vibrating with the wail of police sirens and the muffled, angry arguments of their neighbors. The air smelled permanently of stale cooking oil and cheap bleach, a stark, horrifying contrast to the imported floral arrangements that used to fill the brownstone. Helena sat at a tiny particle-board kitchen table, the surface chipped and peeling. She was holding a needle and thread, trying with shaking hands to mend a tear in a faded cashmere sweater she had salvaged from the foreclosure. Her posture was completely broken. The fierce, terrifying matriarch who had once commanded ballrooms with an iron fist now looked like a frail, exhausted ghost. Across the small table, Marcus stared blankly at a mounting pile of final notice collection letters. He looked 20 years older than he had on the night of the gala. The stress and extreme humiliation had hollowed out his cheeks and stripped away his aristocratic arrogance. He possessed no actual corporate skills, no functional trade, and absolutely zero leverage. The hedge fund managers and legacy bankers he used to golf with refused to take his calls. When he tried to apply for entry-level consulting positions, human resources departments laughed him out of the lobby the moment they recognized his name from the federal fraud indictments. Just yesterday, Marcus had taken a gold watch to a local pawn shop hoping to secure enough cash to pay the heating bill. The pawnbroker had looked at it through a loop and handed it back with a pitying laugh. The watch, a supposed gift from Preston during his wealthy days, was a cheap counterfeit. Marcus had returned to the freezing apartment empty-handed and completely broken. Their isolation was absolute, but my mother, in her desperate delusion, tried to fight it. 2 weeks ago, Helena had put on her last presentable designer dress and taken the subway for an hour and a half into Manhattan. She walked up the polished stone steps of their elite Upper East Side church, the same parish where they had donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to secure front-row pews. She believed that the grace of her religious community would offer her sanctuary. She did not even make it through the heavy oak doors. Two head ushers, men who used to bow their heads when she walked past, stepped directly into her path, blocking the entrance. A woman she had served with on the charity board walked down the steps. Helena reached out a desperate hand, offering a fragile, hopeful smile. "Eleanor, please." Helena had begged, her voice cracking with desperation. "I just want to attend the service. We have lost everything." Eleanor pulled her arm away sharply as if Helena's touch was physically toxic. She looked my mother up and down with an expression of pure, icy revulsion. "Do not make a scene." "Helena," the woman said, her tone echoing the exact same cold elitism my mother used to wield against me. "You dragged this parish into a federal fraud investigation. You leveraged a stolen estate to fund your vanity. You are not welcome here anymore. Do not come back." The ushers firmly closed the heavy wooden doors in my mother's face, leaving her standing alone on the cold stone steps in the middle of the busy Manhattan street. She wept openly, the rain ruining her makeup, as the wealthy congregants walked past her without a second glance. They had sacrificed their only loyal daughter to protect their fraudulent empire. They had bet their entire legacy on the illusion of wealth and the shallow approval of people who never actually cared about them. Now the illusion was dead. The elite society they worshipped had chewed them up and violently spat them back out without a single ounce of hesitation. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, surrounded entirely by the devastating silence of their absolute ruin. I stood in the foyer of the Brooklyn brownstone, listening to the sounds of actual life echoing off the original exposed brick walls. The oppressive, suffocating weight that had haunted this property for decades was completely gone. When I took full ownership of the estate, my very first act was to systematically gut every single trace of Helena Harrison's pretentious influence. The sterile museum-quality furniture covered in plastic was hauled away to a charity auction. The heavy, suffocating velvet drapes that blocked out the natural sunlight were torn down and thrown into the garbage. The intimidating oil portraits of ancestors who never smiled were replaced by vibrant contemporary art painted by emerging black artists from the city. I walked barefoot across the newly refinished hardwood floors, feeling the warmth of the morning sun streaming through the massive bay windows. The space no longer felt like a mausoleum designed to intimidate guests and project a false sense of aristocratic superiority. It felt like a home. The air smelled of fresh espresso and the faint scent of jasmine, rather than the heavy, suffocating bleach and expensive perfume my mother used to mask the rot underneath. I ran my hand along the original mahogany banister, feeling the rich history of the wood. I had not destroyed the Harrison legacy, I had cleansed it. I had burned away the fraudulent infection and preserved the foundation, allowing something entirely new to grow in its place. That philosophy extended far beyond the physical walls of the brownstone. Reclaiming my childhood home was only the first step in dismantling the toxic cycles I had endured. With Preston locked away in a federal penitentiary and my parents completely exiled from the financial world, I took absolute control of my professional destiny. I expanded my wealth management firm, drastically pivoting our core mission away from exclusively catering to legacy billionaires trying to hide their assets. I leveraged the massive influx of capital from liquidating the corrupt Harrison trusts to launch a highly specialized division of the firm. I created a comprehensive financial literacy and wealth-building program specifically designed for young Black women. I knew exactly what it felt like to have your financial autonomy weaponized against you by the people who were supposed to protect you. I had lived through the terrifying reality of familial financial abuse, where money was used as a leash to demand compliance and enforce silence. I was determined to ensure that no woman who walked through my doors would ever feel trapped in that kind of nightmare. We hosted free weekly seminars right here in the newly renovated grand parlor of the brownstone. Where my parents once hosted predatory shadow bankers and corrupt politicians, I now hosted brilliant, ambitious women teaching them how to build ironclad investment portfolios. We taught them how to identify the subtle red flags of financial manipulation and familial guilt trips. We showed them how to structure untouchable independent safety nets that no parent, sibling, or spouse could ever leverage or destroy. Seeing the fierce realization of their own power light up their faces was 1,000 times more satisfying than any society gala I had ever attended. I was not just managing wealth anymore. I was arming them. I was giving them the exact same unbreakable financial armor that had allowed me to walk away from my own toxic bloodline. A sudden burst of warm, genuine laughter pulled me out of my thoughts. It drifted in from the expansive kitchen, a sound so pure and unrestrained it would have sent my mother into a panicked rage. I walked down the hallway and leaned against the doorframe, just watching the scene unfold. The massive marble kitchen island was covered in fresh pastries, bowls of fruit, and an assortment of coffee mugs. My closest friends, the women who had supported me when I was the invisible outcast of the Harrison family, were gathered around sharing stories and passing plates. There was Maya, my brilliant lead analyst, fiercely debating the latest market trends while bouncing her newborn son on her hip. Next to her was Sarah, a former mentee, who had just launched her own tech startup, raising a mimosa in celebration. There were no calculated seating charts. There were no strategic alliances being forged over forced polite smiles. There was only absolute, authentic loyalty. Standing at the stove, flipping pancakes with an easy, confident grace, was Julian. He was the lead architect who had helped me redesign the brownstone's interior, but over the last 6 months he had quickly become the architect of my new life. He did not care about the Harrison name or the generational wealth attached to it. He did not care about society columns or country club politics. He saw my drive, my scars, and my relentless ambition, and he celebrated every single piece of it without ever feeling threatened. Julian looked up, caught me watching him from the doorway, and offered a smile that radiated pure, unconditional warmth. He did not demand that I shrink myself to make him feel larger. He was my absolute equal in every way. He walked over, handing me a fresh cup of coffee, and wrapped his free arm securely around my waist, pulling me close. He pressed a gentle kiss to my temple. "You built something incredible here, Chloe," he whispered, looking around the crowded, vibrant kitchen. I leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady, solid rhythm of his heart. I looked at the incredible chosen family I had gathered around me. I looked at the strong, joyful women sitting in my home planning their own empires. The Harrison dynasty, built on lies, manipulation, and exploitation, was completely dead and buried. My parents and Serena were ghosts haunting a life they could no longer afford. But I was still here. I had taken the shattered, broken pieces of my past and forged them into an unbreakable empire of my own making. I took a sip of the warm coffee, letting the rich taste settle as the laughter of my friends echoed through the sunlit room. I finally had everything I ever wanted, and no one would ever take it away from me again. Exactly 1 year ago, I stood in a sterile rented ballroom with a stinging cheek and a shattered heart. Tonight, the air inside the Brooklyn brownstone hummed with the rich bass of a live jazz trio and the unfiltered laughter of my chosen family. It was my 30th birthday. The heavy, oppressive silence that used to choke these halls had been completely eradicated. In its place was the clinking of crystal wine glasses and the vibrant energy of women who were building their own empires. I stood near the edge of the grand parlor, watching the celebration unfold. The transformation of this space mirrored my own internal resurrection. Where my mother had once hosted shallow society climbers who judged each other's worth by the carats on their fingers, I now hosted warriors. Maya was enthusiastically explaining a new investment strategy to a group of young entrepreneurs who had just graduated from my firm's financial literacy program. They were taking notes, their eyes wide with the realization that financial independence was entirely within their grasp. Sarah was handing out business cards for her new tech startup, a venture she funded entirely on her own after escaping a financially abusive marriage. Julian caught my eye from across the room, raising his glass of vintage Bordeaux in a silent toast. He smiled, that warm, steady smile that grounded me every single day. I raised my glass in return, feeling a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. I had not just survived the Harrison family purge, I had thrived in the brutal aftermath. I had built a fortress of love, respect, and absolute financial autonomy. I stepped away from the noise, retreating into the quiet sanctuary of the renovated library to catch my breath. I set my wine glass down on the polished mahogany desk. The surface was free of the chaotic, frantic paperwork that used to define my father's desperate attempts to hide his massive fraud. Now it held only my own meticulously organized client portfolios, representing the clean, honest wealth I was helping other women build. My phone buzzed against the dark wood. The screen illuminated the dim room, displaying a text message from an unsaved number. I picked up the device. The area code was from the Bronx. I did not need to guess who was on the other end of the line. The federal indictments had stripped them of their Manhattan zip codes and their elite cellular plans. I opened the message. "Chloe, please. We have nothing. I am so sorry. I miss my daughter. Can we just have space to heal and start over?" I stared at the glowing screen. A year ago, a message exactly like that would have sent me into a massive spiral of guilt and desperate hope. A year ago, I would have rushed to their rescue, immediately emptying my own bank accounts to shield them from the harsh consequences of their own actions. I would have believed the pathetic lie that my mother actually missed me. But I was no longer the frightened, obedient scapegoat. I read the words again, stripping away the emotional manipulation to see the naked, transparent greed hiding underneath. Helena Harrison did not miss her daughter. Helena Harrison missed the deed to the Brooklyn brownstone. She missed hiring private chefs and swiping limitless platinum credit cards. She missed having a convenient punching bag to absorb her miserable reality. The elite society she sacrificed me to impress had locked her out completely, and now she was standing in the cold, begging for a key to the castle she had actively tried to steal. There was absolutely no apology for the federal embezzlement. There was no accountability for allowing Preston to maliciously drain my accounts. There was no recognition of the brutal, humiliating slap she delivered across my face in front of her country club friends. She just wanted a fresh start funded by my hard work. I picked up my wine glass. The deep red liquid caught the ambient light of the library. I took a slow, deliberate sip, savoring the rich, complex flavor. My heart did not race. My hands did not tremble. There was no anger left inside me. There was only absolute crystalline clarity. I tapped the screen, bringing up the keyboard. I did not type out a long, emotional paragraph detailing my pain. I did not demand an apology she was entirely incapable of giving. I did not engage in the toxic, exhausting cycle of debate and defense that had defined our relationship for nearly 3 decades. Instead, I typed back the exact phrase my mother had texted me 1 year ago when I begged her for help after Preston froze my accounts. The same harsh, dismissive words she used when she thought I was a broken financial liability. I need space. I am better off without you. Do not contact me again. I hit send. I watched the blue message bubble appear on the screen. The poetic justice of returning her exact cruelty was not born of malice, but of absolute finality. I did not wait for a response. I did not give her the opportunity to deploy her weaponized tears or hurl new bitter insults. I tapped the settings icon at the top of the screen. I pressed the red button labeled Block Caller. A confirmation prompt appeared. I confirmed the block. The chain was completely permanently severed. The Harrison legacy of manipulation, entitlement, and abuse was officially dead. I set the phone face down on the desk and turned my back to it. I walked toward the large bay window, looking directly into the reflection of the glass. I looked at the woman staring back at me, strong, independent, and surrounded by people who loved her fiercely. I turned to face the camera, the sounds of the party drifting beautifully through the open library doors. Generational wealth is not just about money. It is not just about trust funds, real estate portfolios, or stock options passed down through a last will and testament. True generational wealth is about breaking generational curses. It is about having the ultimate courage to look at the toxic rot hiding inside your own family tree and deciding that the infection stops with you. They will tell you that blood is thicker than water. They will use the concept of family loyalty as a weapon to keep you compliant, silent, and suffering. But you never owe your sanity to people who are comfortable destroying you. You never owe your financial stability to people who see you as a limitless ATM. Sometimes, the absolute most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away entirely. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. And when it does, you must have the absolute courage to lock the door behind it. Never let bloodlines force you to bleed. You have the power to choose your family, to build your empire, and to protect your peace at all costs. If you have ever had to walk away from a toxic family dynamic, to save yourself, hit the like button right now. Subscribe to the channel to join a powerful community of survivors who are breaking cycles and building their own empires. Drop your survival stories in the comments below. Let the world know exactly how you took your power back. You are never alone in this fight. The story of the Harrison family teaches a profound lesson about personal worth and the true meaning of family. It reveals that bloodlines do not entitle anyone to manipulate or exploit you. True generational wealth is not about inheriting money. It is about having the courage to break toxic generational curses and secure financial independence. By walking away from financial abuse, Chloe demonstrates that a chosen family built on mutual respect and genuine love is infinitely more valuable than a biological one built on deceit. Please like, subscribe, and share your toxic family survival stories in the comments section below.